the first time Elise Monroe heard the word transplant. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of day where hope felt possible. Sunlight warmed the fading leaves, and the wind whispered promises through the cracks of her apartment window. She had been living with end-stage renal disease for 4 years, tied to a dialysis machine for 10-hour stretches. Her life marked by numbers on blood work and the hum of artificial filtration. That morning, her nephrologist, Dr. Lang, called with a cautious optimism she hadn't heard in months. "You're finally on the active list," he said, his voice shaking just slightly, as though daring to believe with her. Elise didn't cry. Not yet. She simply stared at the peeling ceiling above her and whispered, "Thank you." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine life beyond survival. Buying new running shoes, visiting her sister in Chicago, maybe even dating again. There was a future again, and it was waiting. The call never came. Not in November, when Elise kept her phone in her bra at work just in case. Not in December, when holiday cheer made the waiting crueler. Each beep of her phone made her heart spike, only for it to crash back when it was another spam message or a delivery notice. Dr. Lang reassured her during every monthly visit. "Your file is active. You're in good standing." Still, something in Elise began to shift, like a thread pulled slowly from a tightly wound sweater. At night, she started hearing stories on transplant forums of patients getting matched in mere weeks, and others who'd been waiting years. She told herself she was just somewhere in the middle. But then, at her January checkup, something odd happened. A nurse she'd never met before raised an eyebrow at her chart and asked, "How's recovery been?" Elise blinked, confused. "Recovery?" The nurse paled slightly and muttered, "Sorry, must have been another patient," before rushing out of the room. Elise laughed it off at first, but the discomfort lingered like a cold draft you can't place. A part of her wanted to believe it was just a mistake. But another part, one she'd learned to trust after years of advocating for herself, started to whisper that something wasn't right. Elise didn't want to sound paranoid, but the moment she got home, she pulled her medical binder off the shelf. She had always kept meticulous records. Appointment dates, lab results, copies of every email. She flipped through them now with fresh eyes. Her transplant status letter, issued in October, clearly stated she was on active status, blood type O positive, compatible with multiple donor profiles. But when she logged into the hospital's online portal, something strange popped up under recent procedures. A line read, "Organ transplant follow-up, November 28th. Elise froze. That date had passed with no call, no visit. And she hadn't had a transplant. Her stomach twisted. She clicked for more details, but access was denied. Restricted to clinical personnel. The pop-up read. A sick heat bloomed behind her eyes. She called the hospital's main line, navigating through 4 transfers until finally someone said they'd escalate the inquiry. But 2 days passed with no return call. That weekend, Elise drove down to the hospital in person, documents in hand. The front desk staff gave polite smiles and told her a transplant coordinator would meet her shortly. 30 minutes later, no one had come. When she asked again, she was told, "There must be a mix-up." She almost laughed. That was starting to sound like a theme. But Elise wasn't leaving. Not until she got answers. So she waited. Hours passed. And then, at 6:17 p.m., a woman in scrubs quietly approached and asked Elise to step into a private room. The woman in scrubs introduced herself as Tanya Belrose, a nurse liaison for transplant follow-ups. She didn't offer a smile, just a clipboard held tight to her chest. Elise explained everything. Her active transplant status, the unexplainable follow-up note, and her fear that someone had used her identity. Tanya listened without interrupting, but her face tightened as Elise mentioned the November 28th date. Tanya asked for her full name, date of birth, and last 4 digits of her social security. Then she stepped out of the room without a word. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Elise sat alone, the fluorescent light above flickering, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. When Tanya finally returned, she looked paler. She sat down and leaned in close, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not supposed to show you this," she said, pulling a folded printout from her clipboard. Elise stared at it. It was a post-op care summary for a kidney transplant, dated November 28th. The patient's name at the top read, Elise J. Monroe. Her exact name, her birth date, but the emergency contact listed wasn't her husband. It was someone named Maya Keene. Elise blinked. "I don't know that name," she said. Tanya looked over her shoulder at the closed door. "This file shouldn't even exist in your chart, but somehow it's linked to your ID." Elise's voice trembled. "So someone used my name to get a kidney?" Tanya didn't answer. Instead, she quietly tore the page in half and handed the top portion to Elise. "You didn't get this from me," she whispered. "But if I were you, I'd find out who Maya Keene is fast." Elise clutched the paper, her heart thudding against her ribs. Something far more deliberate than a clerical error was unfolding, and it had her name written all over it. Elise didn't wait. As soon as she left the hospital, she opened her laptop in the front seat of her car, the windshields misting from the late afternoon drizzle. She typed Maya Keene into every search bar she could think of. Facebook, LinkedIn, medical boards, and state court databases. First, nothing matched. Dozens of Mayas appeared, but none with ties to medicine, organ donation, or even New Jersey, until one photo made her stop cold. A news article from 5 years ago. Maya Keene, arrested for identity fraud, sentenced to 3 years in prison. Elise clicked. The mugshot showed a woman with striking green eyes and a half-smile like she knew something no one else did. She'd been caught stealing medical identities from low-income patients and using them to access prescriptions and fake procedures, until the feds caught on. Elise's throat went dry. This woman had a history. She'd done this before. Could she have done it again with Elise's identity? But how? Her medical records, transplant approval, social security, it was all protected, wasn't it? Elise thought of the man at the front desk who didn't make eye contact, the transplant call that never came, and the silence when she asked why. Someone had slipped Maya in. Someone had helped her. Elise printed everything and drove straight to the patient advocacy office at the hospital, demanding answers. The receptionist blinked at her like a deer in headlights, clearly unprepared. But Elise refused to move until someone in charge came down. And when a tall man in a tailored gray suit finally approached, introducing himself as Dr. Halbridge, the hospital's director of ethics, Elise saw the way his jaw tightened when she said the name Maya Keene. He knew. She could see it. And for the first time since her diagnosis, Elise felt something colder than fear. She felt betrayal because this wasn't a mistake. It was a cover-up. Dr. Halbridge didn't invite her to his office. Instead, he led Elise to a windowless consultation room with a humming vent and dim lights, as if the truth needed to be whispered in the dark. He sat across from her, his face unreadable, but his fingers tapped a slow, nervous rhythm against the table. Elise didn't waste time. She slid the printouts across to him, the mugshot, the article, the name Maya Keene highlighted in yellow. "She used my name to get the kidney," Elise said, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "And someone in this hospital let her." Halbridge sighed, not in surprise, in resignation. "Miss Logan, you were removed from the transplant list due to a clerical issue, an address mismatch, which flagged your file for re-verification. During that time, yes, someone else was registered under your credentials. We believed it was you." Elise stared. "You believed it was me?" Halbridge nodded slowly. Her documents matched. The photos were different, but there were no facial scans required at that stage. Elise gritted her teeth. His eyes dropped. There was an error. Multiple, in fact. The transplant coordinator has since resigned. "We're investigating." Elise almost laughed. Investigating. After her life had been stolen and handed over like a package dropped at the wrong door. "And Maya?" she asked. "Where is she?" Halbridge's hesitation told her everything. She disappeared 2 weeks after the surgery. She was using multiple aliases. "The address she gave us is a parking lot now." Elise stood up, the chair screeching behind her. "You let her walk away with my organ, And now you want me to believe this is just a paperwork problem? She stepped closer, the air between them charged. You didn't just fail me, you helped her. Whether by negligence or silence, you gave her my second chance. And I will not let this end with a shrug and a whoops. Halbridge looked away. I understand your anger, but if you take legal action, it could jeopardize your standing on the transplant list. Elise froze. You're threatening me. No, he said carefully. I'm advising you, but it was already too late. Elise had heard the truth, and it was louder than any apology. They had chosen someone else's lies over her life. The hospital tried to go quiet. There were whispers of a clerical error, of discrepancies in the transplant database, and an internal investigation that yielded no answers. But Elise wasn't silent anymore. She took her story public, standing in front of flashing cameras with a trembling voice and a folder of evidence. Her image was everywhere: news banners, social media, medical ethics forums. She was no longer the woman quietly wasting away in a dialysis chair. She was now the face of a system that failed to protect its own. The public was outraged. A review of transplant procedures was ordered by the state. And behind the scenes, a whistleblower from inside the hospital finally stepped forward. The whistleblower was a nurse named Talia, who had worked in the transplant unit for nearly 8 years. She admitted she'd seen a chart with Elise's name altered, the transplant data erased and rewritten. She'd reported it to her supervisor and was told it was a mix-up already fixed. But something hadn't felt right. When she saw Elise on the news, she recognized the patient file. What she revealed next unraveled the entire cover-up. Elise's kidney had been rerouted, intentionally, to another patient with powerful family connections. That patient, it turned out, was the daughter of a major hospital donor. The ethics board tried to keep it buried, but once it was out, there was no going back. Elise filed a lawsuit, not just for malpractice but for identity theft, emotional distress, and wrongful medical deprivation. The legal battle was brutal. Hospital lawyers tried to settle quietly. They offered money, apologies, silence. But Elise refused. She wanted the truth. During court proceedings, the donor's daughter, a young woman named Lillian Caldwell, testified. She claimed she didn't know the kidney wasn't hers to receive, that she trusted the doctors, that she had no idea Elise's name was on the original match list. But in Elise's eyes, Lillian's health now stood on the foundation of her suffering. The court was packed. When Elise spoke, she didn't speak as a victim. She spoke for everyone who'd ever been ignored, misused, erased. The jury ruled in Elise's favor. She won damages, yes, but more importantly, she forced change. The hospital's transplant program was suspended pending overhaul. The director resigned. Policies were rewritten, oversight strengthened. National conversation followed. Medical ethics committees began reviewing anonymity procedures in organ distribution. The story shook trust, but it also forced accountability. Elise didn't celebrate with champagne. She went home, sat by her dialysis machine, and looked out the window at the rain. Her health was still fragile, but her voice was now a force. She had exposed a silent crime and ensured it could never happen again. 3 months later, Elise received a call from a new transplant center. Compatible kidney had been found. No strings, no shadows, no corruption. She almost didn't believe it at first. The surgery went smoothly. Her body accepted the organ. And for the first time in years, Elise didn't wake up to the beeping of a machine. She woke up to silence. Peaceful, natural silence. She went for walks again. She tasted food with salt. She laughed and it didn't hurt. She'd never forget what happened. But she didn't live in bitterness. Her fight had rewritten a broken chapter in medical history. As she told a reporter in a follow-up interview, "They stole my name. They couldn't steal my will." When systems fail, silence becomes their greatest weapon, and truth their deepest fear. Elise's story teaches us that vigilance is not just a right, it's a necessity. Medical institutions hold lives in their hands, and one act of negligence or corruption can mean the difference between life and death. Always question what doesn't feel right. Always fight for your records, because sometimes survival depends not on medicine, but on the courage to expose the lies hidden behind it. Subscribe to the White Coat Crimes for more shocking true stories, medical crimes, medical mysteries, and the dark side of healthcare you were never meant to see.